What's going on, everybody? Tej back again with another video, and today we're giving you another 2023 NFL mock draft. And today, my first two-rounder of the NFL draft cycle. We'll do plenty more of these moving forward, but the next one might be just one round, but plenty of names to talk about, and I wanted to kind of dive more into fits. That's kind of why I like doing these. That's why we'll continue to do them every 2-3 weeks or so we can talk about different players and how they might fit on our roster. And that's again the team building component of all this. That's why I like it so much. That's why I like the NFL draft and follow it so closely. So help me out. Tell me what you think down below in the comment section. Do you like the fit, the player that I gave your favorite team? What are their draft tendencies? It's impossible for me to keep up with all 32 teams and their draft history, draft tendencies, all that sort of stuff. So help me out down below in the comment section. And after all, it's a conversation. So let me hear your thoughts. I respond to every comment. Let's talk about this mock down in the comment section. Let's go ahead and start things off with the Detroit Lions. And look, I've had a lot of Lions fans tell me, defense is bad, not going to be a quarterback. I get it. But blank 29-0 against the Patriots. Bye week, come back, score 6 points against Dallas. Now I know, Jamal Williams fumbled the goal line. That game doesn't play out, in necessarily a normal sense. But if you're picking number one, it's time to just go ahead and move this rebuild along. And, the move for Jared Goff kind of had this timetable in mind where after 2 years, it's time to find our future franchise quarterback. Bryce Young's been fantastic. Plus, I've been doing a ton of CJ Stroud, first QB off the board. Let's change it up. Let's go Bryce Young. Next up is going to be CJ Stroud, though. And I'm actually going to make it 3 straight quarterbacks. If the board were to sit like this, Young right now has been fantastic this year for Alabama. And like I said, I've been doing Stroud a ton as the first quarterback. Let's change it up. Young's been stellar. Let's say he goes 1. Stroud, if you're the Texans, you're picking 2. Davis Mills has not impressed this year. And, I think about, there's some other pieces that need to be added to that roster. But, man, that future franchise quarterback and guy who can elevate that offense goes a long way. And then for, Carolina and Will Levis, it's like, one, I don't know if you saw the quote, but, Will Levis comparing himself to Josh Allen. That's bold. We'll see. But, he does kind of have that potential. He is mobile. He has a big arm. Doesn't necessarily play in an offense in Kentucky that I think really maximizes that. But that being said, I look at a fit in Carolina where it's like you've got to find a future franchise quarterback. I'm still in the mindset they're probably thinking young, offensive-minded head coach Ken Dorsey or, someone like that. It doesn't have to be offense to me, but I think that's kind of the direction they're going to think and lean towards. And then quarterback top of the first round makes a ton of sense. So, my last mock, I was like, Levis at 5 feels kind of rich. I like him more at 11 for the Giants, but I don't know. His stock's rising. Mike Renner of PFF has him ahead of CJ Stroud, which that's saying something. So I could totally see where it's, quarterbacks 1, 2, and 3, kind of like what we saw in 2021. Yeah, 2021. So would be an awesome storyline and make for a fun draft to follow. And then it just opens up the door for where, as the day after, or the day I'm recording is the day after the Robert Quinn trade, but that's in a long-term fixture here. And what if Philadelphia were to just have, because of the New Orleans Saints pick they got from, the Saints last draft as they moved up to get Chris Olave, what if they just had Will Anderson fall into their lap? Like, oh my God, what? That defense would find its next level. Like, the reason you bring in Robert Quinn is because, Derek Barnett's hurt. They have a couple other young guys that haven't really stepped up. Plus, they like to have a rotation of 3 or 4. And realistically, right now, it's about 4 deep. You had a Will Anderson, and that guy could be your dude moving forward. So the team that continues to, take value in adding depth in the trenches, if Will Anderson falls in your lap at 4, I have a hard time thinking they're going to pass that one up. And then for the Texans, it's like, hey, you got your future franchise quarterback. Now let's go get the next best player available. That's Jalen Carter. A team that needs more pass rush. Jerry Hughes is kind of carrying the load there. You got Jalen Carter in the middle of that defense. That could change the way that defense looks moving forward. And, last year you go cornerback in top 3, and now you're going pass rusher in the top 5 on top of getting a future franchise quarterback. The pieces are starting to come together there for Houston. Then we get to the Seattle Seahawks. I think this would be an awesome situation here. Myles Murphy, freak athlete off the edge. Uchenna Nwosu's been pretty decent this year, and he's always a player I kind of like, but he is a hybrid. He can play an edge, he can drop in zone. He doesn't do neither really all that well, but kind of a master of many, but skilled at many, master of none type of dude. So I think adding a Myles Murphy and his athletic profile could, again, kind of like what we talked about with Will Anderson, give this defense that dude who could be a double-digit sack year in and year out type of guy for that defense. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've been pinballing back and forth between Kelee Ringo and Paris Johnson Jr. I'll go Paris Johnson Jr. here. It'll be interesting to see if Pittsburgh does decide to move on from Matt Canada. I totally think that's in the cards. Try to reshape the offense. Maybe bring in a guy who has a better vision or something that an offense that they could build around Kenny Pickett. And I think if they do bring in a new OC, whoever that is going to look at the offensive line and be like, yeah, I don't know why y'all were ignoring that. So I can see Paris Johnson Jr. going this high, 6'6", 315, great barrier building, fantastic feet, coming from Ohio State. He just has all the the boxes checked for a top 10 type of offensive tackle. So makes a lot of sense to me. Then we get to the Jags, and I am going to repeat here, same thing I had in my last mock, but I think Jordan Addison adding a number 1 wide receiver to this Jags offense might be the last missing component. Christian Kirk becomes target 2, Zay Jones becomes target 3. The offensive line's held up pretty well, so I think adding that legit number 1 go-to guy for Trevor Lawrence, and this offense can find another gear, and then hopefully that kind of what we started to see the first 3 weeks of the year, hopefully that can become the Jacksonville we see week in and week out moving forward. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. This is where I'm going to have Kelee Ringo come off the board. This team just desperately needs, more outside corner talent. Give credit to Nate Hobbs. He's held his own, moving from playing in the slot to playing on the outside. But nonetheless, they still need another guy. Kelee Ringo will run in the 4-3, 6'2", long arms, has every trait you want to be a first-round corner, and he may well go in the top 10. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons, and look, this is potentially going to catch me a lot of flack with Falcons fans, but there is a rationale behind me taking Bryan Bresee here. One, I think athlete, skills, talent, number 1 recruit coming out of high school, all that says this guy could be a top 10 pick. And got to see a little bit from last weekend, that Clemson game. It's escaping me who they played, but got to see him make a big play late in that contest. And, once he gets back into it, playing the full snap count, I think everyone's going to kind of jump on the hype train. Then plus post-Indianapolis, post-Combine, I think people are going to love Bryan Bresee. And for the Falcons, it's like, yes, I know you have Grady Jarrett, but right now he's kind of playing that 3-tech spot, that 3-4 D end. You need another 3-4 D end. So imagine having Bresee and Grady Jarrett both being guys who can create pressure up the middle. That's, that is interesting, especially, let's just say maybe Tom Brady's still in the division next year. That's kind of his kryptonite, or one of the few things maybe you could label as kryptonite against Brady. So that, and then also you could play Grady Jarrett at nose tackle, and then Bresee plays 3-tech along either side of them. And then also Grady Jarrett, eventually is going to not be playing for the Atlanta Falcons. And maybe this kind of opens up the door to ship him elsewhere, free up future money, get some assets back, or whenever, Jarrett hangs it up, you have a guy in-house that can kind of take over that type of role and be the dude in the interior of the defensive line. So I know Grady Jarrett's there. I'm not forgetting about him, but I think you could still get more there. And then maybe, that interior pressure makes the lives of Arnold WKD, D'Angelo Malone, and some of these other young edge rushers they have a little bit easier. So let me get to the Miami Dolphins, and I'll go Peter Skoronski here. I just look at this team, and I'm like, they just still need one more tackle. Greg Little has just not been good at right tackle, so still looking for that last piece. I think Skoronski has the capability of being able to flip over to play right tackle. He might also play guard. So I could see them maybe moving Robert Hunt out to right tackle or something like that. So kind of gives you that flexibility inside out. And also I look at this Miami team, it's like, hey, man, outside of that one last offensive line spot, the offense is in a pretty healthy spot. And I think they could go edge. Maybe that's kind of the position you could, point them towards here just to take that defense to a next level. But, I think this team roster-wise is looking really, really healthy right now. Then we get to the Cardinals, and I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson. I actually think they have him as an interior player here on the Draft Network. They don't. They have him in edge, sorry. There we go. Found Tyree Wilson, and 66 right now on the PFN draft board, but I think that's going to change. Freak athlete, and huge size, 6'6", 275. Massive human being. And then just anytime he wants to, because of how long his arms are, he could just straight arm a dude all the way back into a quarterback's lap. Now, does he need to add some little bit more onto that? Yes, but kind of like how you always knew the Dwight Freeney spin move was there, and he could still beat you with it, or the Jason Taylor swim move, he can still beat you with it, even though you knew it was coming. Wilson always has that in his back pocket, right? Like he can always go to that card. So really interested there. Now, granted, Raw still needs to learn a lot of other moves, but this guy could be one of those project edge rushers, kind of like a Rashawn Gary, where it's like, give him some time, and this guy can become a real beast at the NFL level. Next up, New England Patriots. I'm actually going to go double up at wide receiver these next two picks. Quentin Johnston, starting to see it pick it up at TCU, 6'4", 220, great vertical speed, but also can go up and get the football, great body control, tracks the football well, so has the making of exactly what you want in a deep, down the field stretching type. And the size, on top of all that, is just massive. Like, if he was 6'1", I'd still think of him as a first-round wide receiver. But at 6'4", it's like, that is a weapon waiting to be molded into, that number one wide receiver. So, it'll be interesting to see the timetable, how long it takes him to hit the ground running at the NFL level. But I look at a New England wide receiver room that yeah, they have Nelson Aguilar, but they're fielding calls. And yeah, they have Tyquan Thornton, but I was skeptical about him as a second round pick, so maybe he'll change my mind. But that legit number one guy who can also be, a 4.3 speed type of dude, I think that helps open up that offense a ton. And then we get to the Chicago Bears. I'm going to go Jackson Smith and Jigba. And this is actually one spot where, yeah, he's not going to run all that fast. And again, the athletic measurables aren't crazy, but reuniting him with, or actually, I don't even think him and Justin Fields play together. Maybe there was a little bit of an overlap, but nothing that was super crazy. But nonetheless, getting two Ohio State guys in the same room together can't be anything bad. And, even if JSN only can work from the slot, that's been my big question mark this whole, draft cycle about JSN. Can he do something other than play from the slot? But even if he can't, it's him, and then you have Darnell Mooney on the outside as that, 4.3 speed type. That's a nice compliment there. And then you're just adding more pieces for Justin Fields to try to, showcase that he could be that franchise guy. Because, you look at that New England game and he's having to do a ton with his legs. And I mean, yeah, there's errant throws, but there's also bad conditions in that game. And also, I feel like some of the reasons he has errant throws is because he's trying to put the ball in the absolute perfect place, and he's putting so much pressure on him. So get him some playmakers, take that pressure off his shoulders, and I think JSN could be a really nice fit for that offense. And then next up, let's go to the Commanders. And I'm going to go a little different here. I really like the Antonio Johnson fit for this defense, but kind of that same mindset. I'm going to go with Brian Branch. I have a hard time remembering if they have him as a safety or as a corner. They have him as a safety. And, he truly is this nickel corner type that has the capability of being, a strong, I think potentially even a free safety. You look at his ability to read, the game in a quarterback's eyes. Like, the game just doesn't feel like it moves fast enough for him. So when you see a DB like that at the college level, it's just like, okay, this guy could be special once he gets to the NFL. So I'm kind of banking on some of that. He plays a ton of different roles and becomes that. I could see where it creates a little bit of a frustrating draft profile where it's like, I didn't get to see him truly as a free safety or truly as a nickel, anything like that. You didn't get a big enough sample at any one spot just because he kept moving around. But him playing that star backer role for Nick Saban, I think, is a huge badge of honor in a lot of ways. And his capabilities to move in the slot, that's something this team could use to play the strong safety spot. Cameron Curl's been fantastic in that role, but maybe you could rotate those guys, one up top, one down low. Or I think Brian Branch with his ball skills, and I think he's a solid enough athlete where maybe he becomes the free safety of the future. But I kind of think of how the Bucs use Antoine Winfield Jr. I think that's what teams should be looking at as kind of a blueprint for how you maximize Brian Branch. Next is the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to repeat here. Different draft position, though. Michael Mayer, last mock, he went like 27 to the Packers. So 16 feels probably a little bit better because, again, this draft class isn't crazy, at least right now. Maybe it's just because we don't know enough yet. But I think Michael Mayer, despite being a tight end, is probably a middle of the first round type of guy. And this Green Bay offense, I mean, they're trying to find wide receivers at the deadline for a reason. They need more pass catchers. They need more weapons. Michael Mayer not only is a pass catcher, but also would help Matt LaFleur in that run game, I think, pretty substantially. And, he's certainly better than Robert Tonyan. So there's an upgrade to be had there. Next, Indianapolis Colts. Going back to the offensive line here. Let's go with Olu Fashanu. This guy's been a real standout player at Penn State. Just really did not have a whole lot of snaps under his belt before this year, so he's a true breakout candidate. Not a name that a whole lot of people are familiar with yet, but he's been stellar at Penn State. And I look at this Indianapolis team, and it's like Matt Pryor, Bernard Ryman, they've both struggled at left tackle. So maybe you don't want to give up on Ryman yet. But given how important that one last weak link on that offensive line is right now, it might just be worth, go ahead and just go ahead and making that move. And then, Ryman, he's a third round pick. Maybe he just becomes a really nice swing tackle. I still think there's some value to be had there. Or, if injury happens, he's a great plug and play option potentially down the line. So I'll go Olu Fashanu here for the Colts, and, quarterback obviously in play. But I think with the top three off the board, you're getting into a tough spot here. But we will have one more quarterback go in the first round here. Next to the Cincinnati Bengals, we just saw Eli Apple get benched, so it could be a team that's looking for corner. We'll see how Cam Taylor-Britt plays in that spot. I also kind of think of him as a potential Von Bell replacement more so than a cornerback replacement. Dax Hill could play corner. I'm kind of intrigued by his skill set at that position, but that would also take a Jesse Bates extension. So I don't know exactly what those first and second round picks from last year for Cincy, what their true position moving forward is going to be for Cincinnati, but adding Cam Smith is pretty close to a sure thing replacement for Eli Apple in my eyes. So really good in off coverage. I think he has the skill set to become a man press guy, and that Cincinnati defense tends to change their coverage a ton. I think Cam Smith could benefit from that. I think he'd be a nice fit for that defense. So I think right here at 18, solid value for him as well. And staying at the cornerback position, I'm going to go Joey Porter Jr. here for the Bucs. They could be looking at quarterback. I think they'll opt to go veteran route next year if Brady does hang it up or leaves the team or whatever. A lot to be figured out there. But You're facing the prospect of either losing a Jamel Dean or Sean Murphy Bunting. So cornerback's certainly going to be something they have to try to account for here in the first round, and try to, that defense has been kind of disappointing. And, we're coming off Thursday Night Football where, it wasn't a high scoring game, but I mean, the Bucs right now are a Sunday away from being behind either Carolina or Atlanta for first place in that division, which, based off our preseason expectations, yikes for Tampa Bay. So I think addressing a future need, adding a young guy who's been stellar at Penn State year over year, getting better and better, has the, long arms and 6'2" size. It kind of feels like a Todd Bowles type of corner. So I think it's a good fit there. And then we get to the Detroit Lions. And I know Lions fans, I gave you a quarterback to start the draft. How many teams would die for a quarterback at number 1 overall? I know I'm going to catch a ton of flack for that, but I am going to focus on defense the rest of the way. And Trenton Simpson would be a fantastic addition in the middle of that defense, and a perfect pairing with Malcolm Rodriguez, who's been an awesome story as a 6th-round pick. But Trenton Simpson is that coverage specialist, body of a linebacker, but skill sets of a safety. This team needs to get better against the run. I think Simpson makes an impact there. They need to get better against the pass and cover in the middle of the field. I think Simpson makes an impact there. So I think this is a true, linebacker's a tough position because, what's their position value, but I think adding him in the middle of that defense helps both run defense and coverage. So I think he's the exact right player that the Lions are looking at and need right now in the middle of that defense. And then sticking on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go Siaki Ika. I know this is back-to-back mock drafts. I've had this now, but this team it's a player personnel issue to me. They just need a mean run-stopping nose tackle in the center of that defense, try to clog up the middle. But also Ika has shown some signs of improving as a pass rusher. So he moves the pocket from middle, and then you have Bosa and Mack coming off the edge. Look out, opposing quarterbacks. Next up, Baltimore Ravens. We're starting to see some moments from Kayshon Boutte. I think it was the Florida game where it was like, okay, there it is, 100-plus yards. That's the Kayshon Boutte that could go in the first round. And, I say this 1,000 times over. The Ravens have got to add this speed threat. They signed DeSean Jackson, but then he doesn't play on Thursday Night Football. Maybe it's just because they're trying to work him back up to full speed. But, that signing of DeSean Jackson even signals the Ravens know they need to add that 4-3 speed type. Boutte is definitely that. He's also dynamic after the catch. So imagine having an offense where Devin Duvernay, Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and Kayshon Boutte are all in the field. And whichever one of those 4 has the ball, you have to try to tackle them. Good luck opposing defenses. Next up, Seattle Seahawks. And this might be a little bit frustrating for Seahawks fans. But, I think Tariq Woolen is showcasing some potential to at least be, maybe not CB1 moving forward. I mean, I just don't want to get too carried away. But he looks like a guy who's going to be able to be a starting corner minimum for this team moving forward. I think Kobe Bryant, there's still something to work out there. Maybe he's just the nickel guy. They could go outside corner. And, Joey Porter Jr. was who I had in that last mock. I really love that fit. But I could also see this team being like, we need 2 edge rushers. So you add, Myles Murphy, this guy with awesome bend and speed off the edge, freak athlete. And Andre Carter III is also, or Andre Carter II, is also a freak athlete, but just wins with power. And he'll push a tackle all the way back to a quarterback's lap, and that bull rush is mean. And he almost just feels like a locomotive trying to run through somebody on the track. So I think having that balance of a guy who wins with speed and finesse versus a guy who can win with power, but they're also sick athletes all together, that's interesting. And then also, because you went Murphy earlier, you still have Uchenna Nwosu for another year. Andre Carter coming from an academy school, maybe it takes a little bit of time. So I think this is a situation where it's kind of built in, where he can go in the first round, where I think his talent and upside should have him. But also he's not forced into a spot where he has to be productive right away, and all that pressure's on him the second he steps onto the field. It's like, hey, if you're not ready, we can wait till year 2. We can kind of put you in the best spot for your career. So really like that fit. And then plus, after one more year of Uchenna Nwosu, it could be Murphy and Carter as your guys on the edge. And look at what the Seahawks just did, drafting their bookend tackles in the same draft. They could do something similar with their edge guys. Next up, Tennessee Titans. And, the issue continues to stand out to me like they're going to need a left tackle in the future. I think Taylor Lewan's probably a prime cut candidate next year to save some money because this team is still trying to figure out the best way to, find cap space. That's the downside of a Ryan Tannehill type of contract. But, Broderick Jones, I think, could be a plug-and-play guy there at left tackle. He's looked solid this year at Georgia, just has the body for it, has the strength for it, and I think he'd be an awesome fit in that power blocking scheme. Put Derrick Henry running behind this guy. I think a lot of good things come out of that for Titans fans. Then we get to the Jets, and this was a tough one because I was like, man, Zach Wilson is kind of the biggest thing holding them back. I don't want to say holding them back, but he's not the reason they're winning games. It's that run game and that defense. So, in this spot, Trenton Simpson's off the board. Really like that fit as the Fred Warner type for Robert Saleh. Yeah, you could go offensive line. What are they going to do with Mekhi Becton? Is Elijah Vera Tucker going to stay at right tackle? And plus, they continually battling injuries, good to add depth, but I'm going to actually go with Brandon Joseph, who's been really solid this year in coverage for Notre Dame. Almost wore my Notre Dame hoodie actually today. But nonetheless, he's been fantastic in coverage, and the tackling numbers have improved a ton this year. So that was my big question mark. Can he become a more sure tackler? Now, still work to be done there, but he has taken steps in the right direction. I think adding a true free playmaking, ball hawking type at the top of that defense could go a long way and add that much more that makes that Jets defense scary to play, because they're getting pressure. And Quinn Williams taking that step forward, and that interior pressure could force some errant throws, some bad decisions, and Brandon Joseph could be the beneficiary there. Then we get to the Dallas Cowboys, and this is another repeat selection here. I just love the idea of I'm actually going to change my mind here. No, I'll go with Clark Phillips, and then Antonio Johnson's going to be my next pick here for the Vikings. I'll go ahead and do them back-to-back here. But Clark Phillips, I think adding another playmaking, ball-hawking type of corner opposite of Trevon Diggs could just take this defense to an unfair level. Like, they're already elite. If they get any better, it's like, dude, good luck. I mean, so, I even kind of hit on this in my, power rankings. I think you get Dak Prescott back, this defense can take more chances because they know there's a higher floor when it comes to their offense now with Dak Prescott, and also a higher ceiling, I would argue. So adding another guy who could be that playmaker. At one point this year, he had like 4 picks in a 2-week span. That type of dude, but also just in straight up coverage, he's been really, really solid. Now, granted, doing it at Utah, I know that's going to be one of the big flaws against his draft profile, but the talent's there. Now, the last remaining questions could be arm, like 5'10", 183. I'm curious to see what that arm length number looks like. Then Antonio Johnson, so he falls down quite a bit. I'm going 15 to the Eagles in the last mock, and I even said, if he falls to 15, I'd be a little surprised. Here he falls 27. He does feel like a player who's losing a little bit of steam here, kind of like DeMarvin Leal last year for A&M, actually. But, I know that team is struggling right now, but I still look at a 6'3", 200-pound, versatile defensive back who can play nickel, strong, or free safety. And you add this to a Minnesota defense. Yeah, I know they went safety last year, but they desperately need a nickel corner. And what's one more piece you could rotate down in the box? And at 6'3", 200, it's just adding a little bit more talent to that secondary that I'm excited to see what Lewis Cine comes, it grows into be. But a scary injury, what's the future of that look like? Cameron Bynum's shown moments, but is he a guy you can trust to be, the replacement to Harrison Smith? And plus Harrison Smith, wrong side of 30, So just trying to prepare for the future, but also adding a nickel corner, I think this team would be really benefited by. And when you're picking here at 27, you don't have the luxury of being like, hey, we need a number 1 wide receiver. Let's go draft one. It's like, okay, now we got to pick and choose. What's the thing that can maximize your value? And I think Antonio Johnson, I think the value matches up here at 27, and I trust that Minnesota coaching staff to find a role for him. So then we get to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to go edge here, and a few different players we'll go with, or could go with here. I'm going to go Felix Ndike-Uzomah. And the reason for that is, I think, one, Carlos Dunlap, he's been fine, but if he's your other starting edge, that signals that this team is looking for another player and an improvement there on the other side of George Karlaftis. But Karlaftis was this, high motor, wins with aggressive hands and strength, and kind of a brute force defensive end. I think if you add the speed and the bend of his Felix Ndike-Uzomah on the other side, kind of like what we talked about with the Seahawks earlier, we add speed on one side, power on the other, then you can play mismatch against tackles who maybe struggle against one or the other, and you can just flip the sides. Really easy to do that as an edge, a lot harder to do it as a tackle. So adding that type of speed and first step ability and bend on the other side of George Karlaftis allows that Chiefs defense to really, just basically give headaches to opposing tackles, and whatever they struggle with, they can put an edge in front of them that is skilled in that type of, edge rushing and, that type of skill set. So, I really like that fit there. And plus, trying to add more defensive talent. This team's going to put up points. Can they try to do a little bit more to slow down other offenses? And then this team just becomes, or continues to be, a juggernaut. Here we go. Our other first-round quarterback, the New York Giants. In the spot where, I had Levis to them at 11 last week. Draft order's changed a ton here. Let's go Hendon Hooker. Now, I don't know if Hendon Hooker fully gets into the first round in the mock draft or in the NFL draft, because he's 25, and it's taken a while for him to kind of break out. And it was the same questions I was asking about Kenny Pickett last year, where it's like he had a down year for the ACC. You're 24 years old, and now you look like a Heisman candidate. That feels like, age kind of propelled you to a spot where you were, a grown man taking on, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. Could be a similar type of thing with Hendon Hooker, but dude, he went toe-to-toe with Alabama and looked stellar. Now again, 25-year-old besting the 21-year-old, just, it feels a little lopsided there. But I could also see where, Dable in the spot at 29 is like, hey, Daniel Jones is not my guy. Hooker still has that mobility. And I look at what he's done with Tennessee, and the 5 touchdowns from Jalen Hyatt. We're actually going to talk about him a little bit later on. But I could just see Dable being like, enough mobility, enough of an arm. This guy could be my QB facilitator. I don't need him to be anything special. We'll revamp that wide receiver room. My scheme will get people open. He'll be my facilitator. Kind of an interesting idea. I do like Hooker a little bit more as a second round prospect. If you take him at like 40 or something like that, that's a little more appealing to me. But maybe he does sneak into the first round. He's been fantastic this year with Tennessee, and a big reason why they're one of the best teams in college football this season. Let me get to the Bills. This is going to be another repeat pick. I think the emphasis has got to be on, like, you got to know what the future of that safety position is looking like. Jordan Poyer did return after, missing just 1 week with a hip injury, but Micah Hyde, is he ever going to play again? That's a scary injury that he suffered earlier this season. So if he hangs it up, you got to have a replacement. And even if he doesn't, having Jordan Battles at third safety, I think that could open up the defense and Leslie Frazier do some creative stuff, but also just in case of injuries, that's a really nice contingency plan to have in place. Another repeat pick here, it's going to be Bijan Robinson. Sorry, Eagles fans, you're probably sick and tired of seeing this, but all-around offensive weapon. He makes a ton of sense, especially at 31. He's still, you're paying a first-round running back, so he's still like upper percentile of, running back pay, but still probably cheaper than what Miles Sanders and Boston Scott together would, cost. So go ahead and get a, full offensive weapon, a guy you can play out wide, play in the slot, and be the best pure runner in this draft class. Like that fit a ton for Philadelphia. So we're on to the second round. Let's go more defense here for the Detroit Lions. Let's go Christian Gonzalez. And really stood out this year for Oregon. I think he profiles as a guy who can play man and zone. So, I look at this Lions defense that after 6 picks last year, Amani Oruwariye is just really taking a nosedive in production and play, and gets benched, healthy scratch last week. So clearly they're still looking for another starting boundary corner. I think Christian Gonzalez could be that guy for him. Next up, Houston Texans, and with rumors of Brandon Cooks being potentially on the move, and maybe even this offseason, it kind of makes sense. His cap number is about to go through the roof, so I could see them trading him to a contender, adding on a void year, or extending on his contract and adding 2 years plus a void year or something like that. And then that, that cost is more beneficial to a contender, and Brandon Cooks obviously gets to go play for a championship as opposed to just playing in Houston and not finding the end zone. Let's go Josh Downs. He feels like a logical replacement there for that skill set you would lose with Brandon Cooks. Good downfield speed, and in that North Carolina offense, they put up points in bunches. Drake May looks like a potential top quarterback in 2024, and Josh Downs has kind of benefited from that and really showcased being a vertical threat. I think he makes a logical replacement for Brandon Cooks. Next up, New Orleans Saints, and could be a quarterback spot. This could be another place where it's like Hendon Hooker. Could be kind of interesting with a healthy offense of Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, Alvin Kamara. It's like, yeah, just be a facilitator. Get the ball in their hands. So that was interesting. I thought about quarterback here. If Hooker did make it here, that was in my mind. But I'm going to go Jaquelin Roy. David Onyemata is just not playing at the level that he once was. That interior defensive line, I think, is a big reason why this team's rush defense is taking a step back. And I look at Jaquelin Roy, especially with Mason Smith, probably going to be IDL 1 in 2024. With Smith not playing, Roy's kind of had the center of the focus, that middle of that defense, and he's been really good against the run and a really sound pass rusher. He's been able to do both so far this season. So adding not only interior pass rush, but also getting back to the levels the Saints had been at in years prior, stopping the run, I think that's a big addition to that defense, trying to get them back on track. But again, quarterback is kind of interesting there at 34. Next up, we get the Cleveland Browns. This is an offense that feels like it still needs another wide receiver. And I want to talk about somebody I haven't really mentioned a whole lot on this channel. Maybe I gave out an honorable mention to Parker Washington in my wide receiver video. Like, I don't think he was in the honorable mentions part of that video, but like an honorable mention. But, profiles definitely as a slot type. Almost kind of like Jahan Dotson in a lot of ways, where it's like, has the size, the shiftiness, the route running ability, the yards after catch, skill set. That makes him like, this dude can definitely live from the slot, which even if you only got that, you're looking at a true slot wide receiver to replace, obviously no Jarvis Landry there anymore. And then it's kind of Amari Cooper by himself being the wide receiver with production. So that guy can play on the outside. You play Parker on the inside, and, opens up that offense a little bit more for Deshaun Watson. But also, you look at the touchdown catch last week for Parker Washington, and just elevates, climbs the ladder, good body control, tracks the football in, and he's not Jahan Dotson, but that's the same type of skill set that, we kind of saw from Dotson. So it's interesting to see, like, again, you can't helmet scout. You can't just assume Washington's going to be the same thing as Jahan Dotson, but just like how Penn State just always finds ways to have these sick athletes, especially on the defensive side. They're athletes, Micah Parsons, need I say more, Arnold Ebiketie, Dafe Owe, Jaquan Brisker. Like, they always have these insane athletes on the side of the ball. Is there something to that? Is that a program? Is that the way they're recruiting? Is that the way their coaches? Is that the strength and condition? Is there a trend there? And I could just see, Parker Washington, Jahan Dotson having a similar skill set because that's the way they're being coached up. That's their wide receiver coach. That's the way they're offense, something like that. So I think that's kind of an interesting fit. But even if you don't get that type of, high point, win at the catch point, go up and get it type of skill set, I think as a pure slot wide receiver, that's an addition to this offense that they could desperately need. Because right now, again, it's kind of Amari Cooper doing it all by himself. Back to the Seattle Seahawks. I am going to go offense here. I still think this team can get better on the interior, and I think O'Cyrus Torrence has been really good this year at Florida. The question will be, is he a better fit for power versus zone blocking scheme? Let's just get a little bit more tape. Let me see a little bit more of him at Florida. Let me get a feel for what Seattle's going to want to do next offseason. But minimum, I think this is a guy who could play, plug and play left or right guard, where the team is still trying to get better on the interior. And, big smile on the face of Kenneth Walker if this were the pick. And we've already gone defense a couple of times. Let's continue to, patent down. I think Pete Carroll retires at the end of this year, but a couple of edge rushers, then a guard. We're just kind of furthering that Pete Carroll image of what this team should look like. Win with run attack and defense. So maybe he won't retire. Next up, Pittsburgh Steelers. So we went offensive tackle in the first round. Now we got to go corner here. Let's go Garrett Williams. I think this is totally a guy who could go in the first round. Gotten better year over year at Syracuse. Really nice athlete. I think he'll put up some great numbers at Indianapolis. At the combine, plus 6 foot, right around 185 to 190 pounds. Just looks and feels like an NFL corner. And Syracuse is kind of been able to build some momentum. Efetu Melifonwu, Andre Cisco, they're starting to get these guys in the secondary, a lot of NFL draft buzz and get these guys going, sooner or earlier and earlier in the NFL draft. So credit to Syracuse. I think Garrett Williams can be the next one of those guys. In Pittsburgh, they dropped 4 picks. Minimum, if you can reel in an interception, that was 4 picks dropped against Miami. That is, if you reel it in, it automatically, probably put a smile on a lot of Steelers fans' face. But, Ahkello Witherspoon is nothing to write home about. Cam Sutton, nothing. I like Cam Sutton, but I like him more as a nickel. Levi Wallace is fine, but he's making $4 million a year for a reason, right? So let's go ahead and try to make a serious investment there into the secondary. Back to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I know earlier I said the offensive line's better than what I had expected. Let's go ahead and get them some extra insurance there in the interior, and I think Connor Beebe. Realistically, you signed Brandon Sheriff last year. He's been an improvement there at right guard. Connor Beebe could then be the left guard, and you feel that much better with the left side with Cam Robinson playing a little bit better and Connor Beebe there next to him. So this guy who plays left tackle at Kansas State, I think he's a nice addition. He kind of profiles to me better a little bit at guard, so makes a lot of logical sense there. And you're just putting more and more resources trying to make the most ideal situation around Trevor Lawrence. That's got to be the focus next year. Could be, Shaq Griffin, gets toasted by Alec Pierce. That's all I think about now when I think of Shaq Griffin. So corner could be in play. Safety for sure. Rishon Jenkins is probably somebody who's going to be cut next year. Maybe another interior defensive lineman, pass rushing type at that 3-tech spot, maybe. But kind of like Connor Beebe there and the value there at 38. Then we get to the Carolina Panthers, and I'm going to go with a little bit of a different name here. There's a ton of edge rushers. You're going to see a ton of edge rushers come off the board here. Let's go Zach Harrison. He was one of my honorable mentions in the edge rankings, and the talent's never really been the question. And I think this is a guy who's probably going to run in the mid-4.4s. This guy moves. He just can't turn to save his life, but you're starting to see that change a little bit. Like this last week, he had this little bit of work around the cone. You saw a little bit of agility, be able to, get the hip movement and bend the ankle. It's like, okay, there we go, Zach Harrison. You're starting to figure it out. So if that trend continues and he adds a little bit more bend, okay. But if not, you're still talking about one of the bendiest edge rushers you can win with speed, finesse with Brian Burns. So minimum, Zach Harrison can run a 4.45 type, that type of acceleration through an offensive tackle, and he has 6'6" frame, 270, 280 pounds. Looks like an NFL edge rusher. So I think, he has the talent. Hasn't always been that consistent. Ohio State been a little bit better this year, though. Starting to see a little bit more bend, which would be great. And I think pairing him up with, Brian Burns, because unfortunately, Yetur Gross-Matos has just not been anything special, and I think adding an extra edge rusher opposite of Brian Burns makes that defense that much more legit. Then we get to the Raiders, and every year I feel like I'm trying to find them a big guy in the middle of that defense. And Gervon Dexter, still raw, still a bit of a work in progress. Don't know if he'll necessarily even declare this year, but man, that dude is just absolutely massive. And you see some flashes of the pass rush getting there, and I just want to see this team add a big dude there in the middle. And, with the pass rush upside there, think about how much easier that makes the life of Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. But also, ideally, this guy could just help this team that has always struggled against the run. Basically, my entire lifetime, it feels like this team's never had a good run defense. Dexter could be a benefit and a help there for the Raiders. Next up, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to go Noah Sewell here. Last mock I said, hey, Lions fans, because I had him going to the Lions at 26 or 27 or something like that. And I said, right now he's not playing like a first rounder. But, once you get outside the first round and you're talking about a guy who once was kind of thought about maybe being a first round pick, he's going to have a great combine, he's going to put up some crazy numbers. And, his blitzing ability and his pass rush skills for a Dean Pease defense that will blitz up the middle with their linebackers a ton. Makes a ton of sense. I'd also love to see him fall to the Giants in Wink Martindale. Like Noah Sewell, Wink Martindale, that's the pairing. If I could have one draft player to team, I think that'd be one of my favorite fits I could make. But you play the board here. We're not playing teams and fits completely. And I think Noah Sewell would be a really nice addition for Dean Pease in that defense as well. And you look at Troy Anderson, really good athlete. Maybe he becomes the coverage guy, sick 40 time there for an inside linebacker, so all-world athlete who's literally played time at running back. So maybe he's kind of the sideline to sideline guy, and then Sewell can kind of focus in on being the pass rush specialist. Back to the Arizona Cardinals. So earlier on, we went with edge for Arizona. Now let's change it up and let's go corner. I think those are kind of the two still big, most glaring needs for this team. And I did want to talk about another name. Devon Witherspoon's been really standing out this year at Illinois, been really sound in coverage. PFF grades have been there. And also it's just delivered absolutely one of the biggest hits you'll see from the college football season this past Saturday. So his willingness to play against the run and make tackles certainly won't hurt his draft stock. So definitely a guy with momentum heading in the right direction. He's really stood out this year at Illinois. And again, you have Byron Murphy, you have Budda Baker, but there still needs to be more talent there in that Arizona secondary. Back to the New England Patriots. This team's been looking for a linebacker for a while, and dude, if Jack Campbell doesn't feel like a New England Patriot, then I'm not sure what he feels like. This is just old school inside linebacker through and through. And, I look at that New England, middle of the defense, and that's kind of one of their biggest, most glaring needs on that side of the ball. So there's a sense there, and a lot of people wanted to see them go linebacker in the first round last year. A lot of people were projecting and mocking that last year, like mock drafting it last year. I could totally see that being the case here once we get in the second round. And I think here in the second round, you're going to see a fair amount of linebackers come off the board. Now, granted, a couple of guys that have kind of fallen short of expectations, but totally have plenty of time left in the regular season, college football season, that is, to repair that draft stock. Back to the Chicago Bears. Let's go Nolan Smith here. Yeah, let's go Nolan Smith here. I think, moving on from Robert Quinn, this edge rush is going to be kind of rough moving forward. Yeah, you have Travis Gibson and, he's had some moments. He's had some games. Maybe he does prove to be, one of those pieces. But you still need one other edge. You still need to get better there. And Nolan Smith, sick athlete, highly touted recruit. And we're seeing the run production this year at Georgia. And we're starting to see more flashes of the pass rush, I should say. And I think, maybe a little bit of a work in progress. But get him in there with Eberflus, defensive-minded head coach. I think there could be some good benefits. And maybe him and Gibson become that edge duo of the future for Chicago. After Smith, let's go quarterback here for Chicago. Or excuse me, Chicago. Just talk about Chicago. For the Commanders. And let's go with my guy, Tanner McKee. I'm still, a big Tanner McKee guy. Probably not going to be a first rounder. I'd say at this point hasn't done enough to really build up, I think, a resume for that. Maybe back half of the first round if a team really likes him. It only takes one team falling in love with you. But, I look at the Commanders. They can cut Carson Wentz, no cost. So is he even going to be there next year? We'll have to wait and see. I hope it's not Taylor Heineke, please no. So this team, another offseason where we're asking, hey, what's Washington going to do at the quarterback position? So Tanner McKee, I think, totally in the cards once we get to the second round. Then we get to the Green Bay Packers, and we gave them a pass catcher earlier. I think another area where they can still get better is, John Runyon Jr. hasn't been all that impressive. They're still trying to figure out that interior of the offensive line. Now, I know they're also, playing Elton Jenkins at tackle, and he's been banged up throughout this season, and David Bakhtiari is still splitting time there, tackle. So I know they're at 100% healthy, but I think adding an Andrew Voorhees who has that kind of Elton Jenkins swing flexibility to play guard or tackle, makes some sense. I think he'd be a great addition. At minimum, you're just getting a potential improvement on the interior of the offensive line. So trying to bolster that offense. Got to keep Aaron Rodgers happy. We'll give you a tight end who's a good pass catcher. We'll give you an offensive line so you're staying healthy and upright. I think that goes a long way trying to keep the A-Rod man himself in happy states there in Green Bay. I think this is just one of those small moves you can do to just kind of make Aaron Rodgers that much more happy and hopefully not retire next offseason, especially if you're a Packers fan. You're hoping he doesn't. Back to the Carolina Panthers. A little bit of a projection here, but this team could still use another outside corner. Let's go Eli Ricks. Haven't seen a whole lot of him on the field with Alabama. That's kind of a concern, but LSU didn't let him do it a whole lot, but when he did get to, his man press ability could be elite at the NFL level. And I mean that, like, truly elite. Not necessarily the biggest guy, but enough size, enough strength. And that back pedal it's kind of impressive in the fact that he, despite not being a stellar athlete, does not get beat over the top. So definitely I think profiles at the next level as a legitimate, really nice man press corner. And I think about this Carolina defense, it's like, okay, well, CJ Henderson up and down, we'll see, still young. But J.C. Horn has flashed. Like, that dude looks like a potential star in the making as a man press corner. So Eli Ricks could be that other guy on the other side that, maybe C.J. Henderson doesn't play all that great the rest of the year, and they're still looking for a guy to pair up with Horn. I think Eli Ricks has the skill set to potentially, fall in love with if you're looking for another man press type of corner. Back to the Indianapolis Colts. Yeah, we got to go quarterback here again. We went off the tackle, and it's another offseason where, just like we're talking about with Washington, what are they going to do at quarterback? Same questions there for Indianapolis. So let's go Anthony Richardson here in the second round. And obviously, a question mark is he even going to enter the draft? He might not. So he's raw. He'll need time. So it may even take a bridge quarterback for Indianapolis before you get to Anthony Richardson. Maybe that's Sam Ehlinger. Maybe Sam Ehlinger is the dude. A lot to figure out there in Indianapolis at the quarterback position. But again, if we're going to go into another offseason asking who that quarterback's going to be, I think it's fair to put one in their second round of a mock draft. Back to the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll go ahead and give them some edge help here. We went corner in the first round here. Let's go B.J. Ojulari, just having that third guy in the rotation. Hubbard, Hendrickson, and those two guys aren't necessarily the most fleet of foot and the quickest off the line. I think B.J. Ojulari gives you that speed and finesse rusher that maybe they're missing. And minimum, he's your third guy and a DPR specialist, and maybe you can move Hendrickson inside or Hubbard maybe even. And that allows you to have all three on the field at the same time in an obvious passing situation. So just makes that defense that much more legit. On to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to stick with the edge position. I think another team that desperately needs a third, and also Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has not lived up to first-round expectations. And I think Shaq Barrett, because of that, has kind of suffered because now defenses are focusing solely on him because, again, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has not lived up to expectations. So I have Jared Verse. I think he may well go in the first round. I had him going 10 overall my last mock draft. This guy definitely go in the first round. There's a lot of edge talent in this year's class, so he could certainly go well before 50, but still in the top 50. And he wins with speed and burst off the edge and just making it that much more legit of a pass rush trio there, and making it that much harder for opposing offenses. And also maybe that allows you to get that much more out of a Shaq Barrett, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, having them play less snaps, keeping them fresh throughout the course of a game. Plus, he stays in state, which is always a fun storyline. Next up, let's go interior offensive line. And now look, I know that Christian Mahogany is out for the year for Boston College, but he really does feel a lot like a Zion Johnson, where he can play guard, he can play center, he can move across. And it kind of made sense for, if not for the injury, I could totally see where people are like, yep, there's the next Zion Johnson. And I look at this Rams interior offensive line, and yikes. I'm hopeful Joseph Noteboom can get back to like the flashes we saw last year, and then Rob Havenstein gets back to where he's been for a majority of his career, and then you can feel better about the tackle situations. And then Mahogany maybe is that missing piece on the interior. I think he could play guard or he could play center depending on what they want to do with Brian Allen or the other guys at the guard spot. So gives you some flexibility, and it's definitely an area where they have got to get better. So now let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens and Marcus Peters, impending free agent, and a bit of a gambler there at cornerback, and plus, Fuller goes down with an injury. I know there's Jordan Armour-Battle, who I liked him as a fourth-round pick, but let's go ahead and give him some additional depth there at the cornerback position. Tyree Stevenson's really looked good this year at Miami, and ideal size, 6 foot, right around 190. Kind of feels like a Baltimore Raven corner. Also, I feel like I say that just about every prospect I like with the Ravens, but even if he doesn't see the field immediately, Baltimore's just factory, player development. So even if it's, a year or two before Stevenson really steps into a full-time role, put him in Baltimore. I think they could really maximize on, get NFL traits, NFL size, and make him into a, household name type of guy. Back to the Seattle Seahawks, and I think they could get better at linebacker. I'm going to throw out a name that I was really high on in my linebacker rankings, DeMarvin Overshown. He's just been really good this year for Texas. He's been solid against the run, solid in coverage. And the biggest improvement he's made this year is he's cleaned up his tackling. Now, we'll see. That could go awry the rest of the year. But he's really improved as, a true linebacker making tackles. So cleaning up that, plus, 6'5", it just, again, looks like an NFL linebacker for a team that Jordan Brooks, okay, yeah, maybe there's still something to work out there, but could use a guy next to him. And I think Overshown might be that type of dude. But Henry To'o, Justin Flo, keeping them in, the Pacific Northwest. That could make sense too. And we actually have at least one more linebacker I know coming off the board. Then we get to the Miami Dolphins, and even earlier I said, you could go edge. Dude, Isaiah Foskey, I had him in the first round my last mock. So, again, ton of edge talent. It's hard to keep them all, where I think they should adequately be put into mock drafts. But Isaiah Foskey in the second round, again, this defense feels like it's a 10-plus sack a year type of guy, away from going from really good to great. Noah Igbenogany shows out against Pittsburgh, makes a great interception at the end of that game. Add in a Byron Jones. You're feeling really good about that secondary. Javon Holland's an animal. Christian Wilkins is great on the interior. Jerome Baker's having an awesome year. Just missing that finisher there at the edge rush spot. Maybe Foskey is that type of guy for this defense. Now we're going to get to the LA Chargers. And unfortunately, here, I'll even show you. Jalin Hyatt is not on the PFN mock draft simulator, which is a total bummer. So I'm going to go with the next closest thing. I don't know if Jermaine Burton's going to be a second-round pick, but just imagine that's Jalin Hyatt if you don't mind. But both are going to be 4.3 speed type of guys. And Hyatt's coming off a 5-touchdown game against Alabama not too long ago. So need I say more, but that feels like the last missing component for that Chargers offense. I also think a new offensive coordinator is probably much due. But maybe they're missing that 4.3 speed type, and that's the reason Lombardi is not trying to push the ball down the field. Maybe that's why Justin Herbert's not pushing the ball down the field. But I think if you change an OC, add a legitimate downfield burner, Justin Herbert's going to put up some crazy numbers. So maybe I'm thinking too Madden-like, though. But Jalin Hyatt, maybe a Jermaine Burton could be that guy for that Chargers offense. After that, let's talk about Brenton Cox Jr. I think this Titans team could still use a little bit more off the edge. Bud Dupree had a nice sack at the end of that Titans win against the Colts last Sunday. But Harold Landry's banged up. They have a ton of money invested these two edge rushers. Actually, there is an out, I think, after this year for Bud Dupree's contract. If not this year, then next year. So they could move on from him relatively soon and free up a ton of money. And again, like we were talking about with Taylor Lewan earlier, this team is trying to figure out the best way to spend its money and maximize its cap. And Brenton Cox Jr., originally in Florida, he was kind of this guy who's always going to beat a tackle on their outside shoulder. He's going to win with, speed and burst off the edge. But now he's adding that inside counter, starting to see a little bit more pass rush, nuance to his, repertoire. And, if he continues to add a few more moves or adds maybe one more at the NFL level, this guy could make sense as a logical replacement for Bud Dupree and a much cheaper one at that. Back to the Dallas Cowboys. And, this was one that I had to deliberate a while on. I'm going to go John Michael Schmitz. And I know he's listed as a center here, but fifth year, redshirt senior, ton of playing time. I think he's a plug-and-play guy at either center or either guard spot. So maybe he's just an insurance policy there on the interior offensive line. Or maybe he's a potential center replacement for Biotish or, potential left guard or right guard of the future. So I think it's just keeping options open. And, for a team that's contending, the thing that prevents you from hitting your full peak is, well, I guess underperformance, but also injuries, right? So I think adding that little bit of depth, John Michael Schmitz, kind of take a page out of your, NFC East rival, Philadelphia's playbook, right? Always having depth on the defensive line, always having depth on the offensive line. That goes a long way. I'd love to give them like a run-stopping nose here. Maybe a Gervon Dexter could follow them, but I think John Michael Schmitz, given the board, is kind of the next best thing, the next best route I would go with. Next up, we talk about Jalen Duncan going to the New York Jets. And, Duncan's, he's got plenty of people in his corner. Some people think he's a first-round guy, so I'm not quite there, but we're going to have him and one other attack will come off the board here in just a moment. But, upside's there, and he plays in a great offense there, or an offense that really, on paper, should be pretty good at Maryland. But again, the question comes back to, what are the Jets doing moving forward? Is Mekhi Becton someone they're moving on from? Is Elijah Vera Tucker staying at guard, or is he going to stay at tackle? He's played both this year. What are you doing there? Is George Fant a part of your long-term, fixture? Is Dwayne Brown, with a 2-year contract, but, out after the first year kind of makes it feel like it's a 1-year out. So what are they doing with those tackles? So those are the major questions I have there. So I think adding one more guy like a Jalen Duncan makes a ton of sense. Then we get to the Minnesota Vikings once again, and I think they need to start planning for the future. Post Eric Kendricks and also Jordan Hicks is not all that great, so take your pick of whoever you like here. Owen Papo's a sick athlete. Justin Flo has some great potential, but kind of having a disappointing year this season at Oregon. I'm going to go Henry To'o, who's already seen the field a ton at Alabama. And again, it feels like these Alabama linebackers have a pretty good track record of being, plug and then play at the NFL level. And again, it's a position where the Vikings are getting older and older, so even if To'o doesn't see the field yet, maybe he's just a guy who can sit, wait in the wings, and then eventually become the Eric Kendricks replacement. Get to the Kansas City Chiefs. This is where I'm going to go off the tackle here. Replace one former Oklahoma tackle with another. Or we'll have to see how that Orlando Brown Jr. contract plays out. But Anton Harrison, he's just, I sung his praises in my offensive tackle rankings. I think this is even a little low for him. I think a top 50 pick is where he should belong. But he's been fantastic. Has a ton of reps in pass protection. He's got a ton of reps in general. He's been the starter each of the last 2 years before this season. And he's starting to add some more play strength and feels like he's starting to move people, especially in the run game. So the one major criticism I had about him was his play strength and needs to get in the weight room. He even talked about that before the season, and it feels like you're starting to see some of those results. Now, granted, it's not going to happen overnight, but we're starting to see it. And then plus also going from a college to an NFL, workout regimen, I think that will help out the play strength concerns I have as well. Then we get to the New York Giants. This is, again, I'd love to see Noah Sewell fall here, but I'll go Ivan Pace Jr. You look at his PFF grades, 90 plus pass rush grade last year and this year. So you're looking at a linebacker that has got Wink Martindale written all over it. This guy essentially serves as a third pass rusher, third edge, but a third pass rusher just straight up the middle. And I think he would be a fantastic fit for Wink Martindale in that defense. And then, you could go corner. I still have some concerns about what they're going to do with that position moving forward. But I think, adding that pass rush makes the lives of those DBs that much easier. Back to the Buffalo Bills. I'm not crazy about this because I do think Layden Robinson is much more, power blocker versus, the Bills zone scheme primarily. But that said, Layden Robinson in a lot of ways makes me think of Roger Saffold. So considering Saffold's struggling, it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. It's like, well, we'll just get the new one. Get the new model. And that's Layden Robinson in a lot of ways, in my eyes. Now I'm not calling that my final, NFL draft comparison. I'm not really a big draft comp guy just because I think it sets up, poor expectations for fans and people who just want a quick synopsis of who this guy is. But minimum, I think Layden Robinson could be that left guard of the future. And this team's trying to run the ball better and they adapt and maybe, embrace some power blocking concepts. I think he'd be a great fit there. But again, I'm not entirely sure that that zone versus power blocking scheme is going to make a great fit there for Robinson. But it's just kind of that one spot on the offensive line where it's like, yeah, Roger Saffold's struggling right now. They could get better there. So I think Layden Robinson makes sense from that perspective a little bit more. And the last pick, I'm going to go a little off the wall here. I want to put out an honorable mention here for Christopher Smith. He would have been my pick, and actually he's the other safety from Georgia, and he's been awesome as a true free safety. And it feels like, man, you add that ball hawking type of guy at the top of the Eagles defense, look out. I mean, this team is going to be turnover city. But I'll go Tyke Smith instead because he plays that nickel corner spot for Georgia. And, last year had a little bit better of a run defense tackling grade versus coverage. This year it's kind of flipped. He's been a little bit better in coverage, struggled in, the box safety type of components of what he does. But he is that strong safety nickel corner type. Sound familiar? That's Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Tyke Smith, even kind of a similar size profile too. So makes a ton of sense. And if they don't re-sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Tyke Smith could be a plug-and-play replacement there. But again, really wanted to go Christopher Smith, give him a true free. But Tyke Smith, I don't think that would be a bad selection whatsoever. And for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they basically, the draft picks they gave up to get him, they got right back with the Jalen Reagor trade. So I think they could wipe their hands clean at the end of this offseason. But that is going to do it for my first 2-round NFL mock draft. I'll scroll through so you can see all the results. Hold on, got to move myself. Let's go back into OBS and let's get me out of the way. But I'll go through these results so you can see them one more time. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team? Do you like the players that I gave them? How do you feel the 2-round mock plays out for that team? Who do I have going too high? Who do I have falling too low? And who's maybe a prospect I didn't have this 2-round mock that you think will go in the top 63 picks? Love to have your thoughts. It's a conversation down below, so I respond to every comment. Let's talk about it down in the comments section. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It seriously would help me out a ton. If you're new right here, want to see more football content, more mock drafts, hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me, though. Until next time, hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we are signing off.